Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today's guests are Newport City Police Department Detective Jennifer Harlow and Orleans County State's Attorney Jennifer Barrett. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for having us.
Now, are we going to be confused here, Jen and Jen?
No.
I'm not Jen.
You're not Jen.
Right. So, at least I'm the odd person out here. So we are here actually to talk about a very serious topic, sex crimes in Orleans County.
That's right, Scott. It's one of the things that's not spoken a lot about, but it's prevalent in our community. We wanted to bring awareness to the special team that we have and the way we are investigating and prosecuting the crimes.
And you actually have a team.
We do. We have a multidisciplinary team, which means we have people from a number of different organizations, the Department of Children and Families, the Vermont State Police, the Newport Police Department, the State's Attorney's Office, and we have victim advocates. We start at the very beginning in terms of the investigation. All the people are involved, and that carries all the way through the prosecution.
Right. And your role is you're the detective.
Yes.
And what does that entail?
So what that entails is I am assigned reports of child abuse, severe child abuse, sexual abuse that involves children and adults, and aggravated domestic assaults. Part of what I do is also keeping track of those who are registered on the sex offender registry in our community. So if somebody's convicted of a sex crime, they're, depending on what category they are, they're put on the sex offender registry, which is open to the public, and I have to go and check on those individuals to make sure that they're living where they're supposed to be living.
So this is adults and children, or is it only sex crimes on children?
It's both.
Right. And how do you come involved? You're prosecuting them, I assume.
We really start at the ground up. So as soon as there's an intake and the detective has done the initial information gathering, sometimes even before interviews have been conducted, they'll contact my office, and normally me specifically, and we sit down and we talk about what we have, and we create a game plan of how the investigation will unfold. And we're updated throughout the entire investigation about who's been talked to, what has been learned. We discuss what charges should be filed or shouldn't be filed, and we really work as a team from the very beginning.
You know, in a previous chapter of my life, I actually worked for the Chronicle for years, and I used to occasionally do the court report, and you read some records that you guys see all the time, but it leads you to think, what the heck? You look at some of these crimes, the average person, I don't think, understand really what goes on behind closed doors in some families' lives. Do you agree?
I do agree with that, yes.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot that's not spoken about in the community, and a lot of the crimes that we see involve a family member or a close friend. And so a lot of times they're not disclosed at all to law enforcement, but they're starting to be in this county. People are starting to be comfortable coming forward. And a lot of times, even if they are reported, they're sort of kept very, very quiet because of the family member aspect.
Right. I know in my other world I write history for a living, and people often talk about the good old days. Let's go back to the good old days. Well, you know what? In many ways, the good old days were not as good as they used to be. And I believe this is in one of those areas, because people will say, well, back then this kind of stuff didn't happen. No, I actually believe it happened, and I believe it happened more. And I just think now it's being taken more seriously. Do you agree?
I do agree with that it definitely has been taken more seriously. I believe that this community is realizing that the SIU is here. We've been up and running since 2010. These crimes have been investigated throughout many, many, many years, but the SIU itself in Orleans County has been functioning since 2010. So when you were talking specifically about people they know, I've been a police officer for going on 20 years now, and the sex crimes that I've been investigating over those years, I shouldn't say never, every crime that I've investigated, the victim has known the offender. So, like you were saying, the stranger danger, things of that nature, we're not teaching that to children anymore. We're actually teaching them to be, to know their body parts and to be conscious about who is around them, because it's more than likely somebody who's very close to them.
Right. So how do you know when somebody's telling you the truth? Do you have any specialized training that goes beyond just not just being a detective?
So throughout my career, I've gone to many trainings, and I continue to go to trainings. We have state level trainings, national trainings. Some of those include interview and interrogation skills. So we are taught deceptive behaviors, if people are being deceptive, if their answers are not adding up correctly, or the facts that we have, there may be some admissions. It really goes on all the information that you gather and whether or not that's consistent or corroborates with what everything's being told.
So by the time so at what point do you then approach Jen?
As she stated earlier, these crimes, right from the very beginning, because we're part of the multidisciplinary team, everyone gets involved very quickly. When we receive a report, if we have time, we may actually even call them and say, this is what we're going out on. We may go and interview the children. The children may come into the Special Investigations Unit, Child Advocacy Center. Once we receive that information, then we're contacting the State's Attorney's Office. More than likely it's Jen that we're speaking with, and we're going through the facts that we have so far, and then we're, as a team, deciding where to go next, making sure that we don't forget anything or miss anything.
And I assume in some cases, in some investigations, like anything, you get in, you determine there isn't a case. Or by the time you're involved, is it already pretty well determined there is?
No, I wouldn't say when we receive information, a lot of this comes from intakes. So individuals who are reporting something that they've seen or heard to the Department for Children and Families. Many of those intakes are anonymous, so we're dealing with very little information. So in order to do that, we may go out to the schools to talk with children. We may have families bring the children into the Special Investigations Unit, Child Advocacy Center, and that is a safe place for them to be. And we interview them there and see what information they have. Sometimes there is not any information. Sometimes something did happen and the children are just not ready to disclose that information at that particular time. And other times they are ready to disclose. When that information is disclosed, then your investigation and your fact finding just continues to go. And that's how the investigation goes. Sometimes these investigations take several months. Some have taken years, depending on how much information is out there and what you have to gather. There could be many different components to this.
How do you you have one of those jobs where, well, and you do too, you could become incredibly jaded, I would think, if you actually took this all personal, because you see some of the worst of the worst.
Yes, we do. In fact, out of my entire career, I feel that this is one of the most important jobs that I've ever done, is helping protect children within our community. And the reason the special investigations is happening is because we realize as a society and as a community that these crimes are very important and they're very personal. So those who investigate these crimes actually go to training where they're called forensic interviews. We are specialized in speaking with children and gathering information that they have, if they have it. There's a lot that goes into this. We also have vicarious trauma, like you were just saying, becoming jaded and stuff. We all receive so many disciplinaries as far as DCF, the State's Attorney's Office, probation and parole, victim advocates, so umbrella in our area, the victim advocate and the State's Attorney's Office. We all attend training together on many different occasions in order to deal with the overall issues of these crimes, because they are so sensitive and they are very intense.
Yeah, that's what I would think. I commend both of you, because as Jen knows, I have these great rose-colored glasses that she insists I need to take off more, because to me, the world is all good. And every once in a while, I start slipping them off, and I realize the world is not all good. But you have to see so much. You have to see so much bad all the time. Now, when you're dealing with these particularly young victims, a lot of times there must be some apprehension for them, because they might actually have this love-hate relationship with the perpetrator, and they might be the victim, but this is somebody they love.
Absolutely.
And that must make it really tough on them.
It does make it very hard. That is why these cases are so difficult, because 9 out of 10 times you're dealing with somebody who is very close to family. Either it is a direct family member, or it is somebody who is considered part of the family, whether it be that extended uncle or really good friend that they call uncle or aunt or grandpa or something, uncle or aunt or something to that effect. And that's hard for parents, and it's hard for us as society to understand that these children, and even adults but mainly children, who are being offended on by people who they love, care, and trust, and they do have those strong feelings of love for these individuals, they just want the abuse to stop. They don't necessarily not want that person to be a part of their lives. Now, whether or not because of charges or because of the rules and the laws, that may not ever happen again. They may not be able to have contact with that child or that individual. But yes, you're right on that. These young people care very much about those who have hurt them.
Right. Now, Jen, when they get to your courtroom, this is me talking and not Jen, as in you. I still think there's no cure for what ails some of these people. I don't mean in all cases. I'm one of the guys who probably think, bring them out back of the woodshed, but I guess you can't do that. But what do you do with these people?
Well, we have to look at the crime and the strength of the evidence and determine what a fair resolution is. And that means a lot of different things depending on what the facts of the case show. We also deal with children who offend on other children. Mm-hmm. So maybe an older child offending on a younger child, and we would deal with that in the juvenile court process. And so for them, it's all about rehabilitation and how do we ensure that this child gets the help that they need so that we don't see them next door in the adult court. And for adults, it's more of a punishment-based system, but we're also trying to rehabilitate them. We're hoping that they're going to get, for the most part, some type of counseling, something to make it so when they're back in the community that they don't reoffend. And the Department of Corrections has different types of programming. Some are in the facility in jail, some of them are in the community supervised by the Department of Corrections, but those are all things that we're looking at in terms of a resolution. And there's a lot of cases that we have where we're looking for maximum jail time. Just the offense is such that we think they should be in jail for the mandatory minimum, 20 to life or 25 to life, depending on the crime, and that happens.
And I understand that's no picnic being a pedophile or a child molester in prison.
That's what they say.
Yeah. I still, I understand the kids on kids. You can understand that, but then you look at and you think of adults on little kids, and you think, what is the recidivism rate? I have to believe it's high. Is it?
I'm not sure that we would know that statistically. Generally, if somebody was convicted, a lot of times they're spending such an amount of time in jail that we wouldn't see them again for 10, 15 years, so it's hard to look at. But there are times where we have cases where someone has offended on a family member 20 years ago, and now there's another disclosure that a family member has offended on another child, like grandpa on daughter 20 years ago, grandpa on grandchild now. That's something that we do see, especially when the offenders have gone untreated.
Sitting here listening to the two of you makes me realize I'm really glad I do what I do, and that you guys are made for your jobs, because you see that side of the world that most of us don't see.
Yeah, they're really tough cases, Scott. It's hard, especially from the prosecution standpoint. This isn't a case where it's like CSI, we have some type of smoking gun or fingerprint or something that seals the case for the jury. These, a lot of times, the cases rely on the disclosure of a child.
Right.
And it's our job as a team, and especially the forensic interviewers and the detectives, and that's why it's so important that they have the specialized training and knowledge, that they have to do really good interviews for us to be able to determine, did the crime occur, and for us to have the strongest possible case for when we go into the prosecution, which we know will be an uphill battle no matter what.
Now, with your job, Detective Harlow versus Jennifer, the state's attorney, do you do just you work for the Newport Police Department? Do you do just Newport, or do you do around the region?
So how the special investigation works is actually the entire county of Orleans.
Right.
So I do investigate reports that are within the city, but I also go all over.
Right.
So I'm in every town, every school in this entire county.
Right. I years ago I did a story on Ted Cantwell, who used to be Trooper Ted Cantwell, and he was probably the beginning stages of what you are, and he was, I know he ruffled some feathers, but it's probably true is not every trooper, not every officer is probably necessarily equipped to interview a child, especially in a sex crime, because you have to approach it totally. It isn't that name, some officers, let's be real, name, rank, serial number, that doesn't work with a 6-year-old. And so do you think it really does help having somebody like you who is highly trained?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And kids can see right through you. So they know when you're not genuine. They know when you're not, when you may be distracted or something. They catch on to that very quickly. So you really have to pay attention to that. You really have to know how their minds work, how their developmental stages and different ages and things, and every individual and every child is differently, and you have to treat them that way.
Do you always, I can imagine one thing that would come up, and how would you handle it is, since so many of them are probably reluctant to talk because they don't want that loved one to go to jail, how about if they come right out and say, he's not going to jail, is he? Because I have to believe that comes up sometimes.
Yes, it has, and we are truthful with them, because again, if you're not honest with these young people, then you're looking at possibly dealing with them for the rest of their lives in some fashion. So you are as honest as you can be with them, and you tell them that what they, it's not their fault, they did nothing wrong, and that this person, depending on their age, is an adult, and they're the ones who are responsible for their actions, and we're not sure what's going to happen yet, but that is a possibility. Because sometimes before you get to these children, they've had all these influences from their families and outside sources, so they're being told different things, and sometimes that's why they don't disclose.
Right. Okay, courtroom time. So they get to your courtroom. The prosecutor, not the prosecutor, the culprit. What happens?
Well, it depends on the case, but initially, once the case is completed, it's sent to my office, and I look at it, and I look at everything that we've learned, and we determine what charges should be filed. And once the charges are filed, they come into court for an arraignment. And so if it's a more serious crime, well, they're all fairly serious if we're talking about sexual assaults, but a lot of them will come in as an emergency arrest or a lodging.
Right.
So they'll be arrested and brought in front of the judge very quickly. Those cases we look at and we determine, should this person be held without bail? And the way we look at that is it a life offense case? Are they facing life in jail? Then the state would likely ask for someone to be held without bail. If it's not a life offense case, we're looking at, are they a danger to the public? Do we think that they will reoffend or cause somebody harm while they're out? And if so, we ask for them to be held without bail. And that means they wouldn't have any bail at all until their case was entirely over. They'd wait for the resolution while they're in jail. And so we go into court, we have that time in front of the judge makes the determination, and then we start the discovery process, which is really the giving the defense everything that we have, the opportunity for them to interview the detectives and some of the people involved.
Do they also, during the whole court proceedings and prosecution and everything, do the children have to testify or get up on the stand?
It depends on their age, and it depends on a number of different factors, but a lot of times yes. But below a certain age, we can use some of the hearsay and some of the forensic interviewing if it was done correctly, which is why it's so important to have specialized detectives who are interviewing the kids so that we can avoid having depositions or avoid putting them on the stand if we don't need to.
Right. Now, we've heard a lot about team. Right now, we know we have 2 members of the team here. Who else? You don't have to say names or anything if you don't want, but who else are members of the team?
Well, we have another detective from the Vermont State Police. We have members of the Department of Children and Families. There's 2 predominant investigators with them. 2, right?
1 designated, and then there's another 2 that possibly come in once in a while, yes.
And there are members, there's victim advocates from my office, and there's victim advocates from the organization Umbrella locally.
Right. So there's quite the group of you then, and you're not working this in a vacuum. So you maintain pretty good contact with each other, I assume.
We do, and generally we try to get together fairly frequently and go over the active investigations and the active prosecutions as a team. We also have a member of the Department of Corrections, the person who supervises them, who comes to some of the meetings when we're talking about the investigations, because they have knowledge, especially when it's somebody who's already been through the system.
Right.
Okay.
So how prevalent is sexual assault of some kind on children?
So national statistics are 1 in 4 girls before the age of 18 will be sexually assaulted. 1 in 6 boys before the age of 18 will be sexually assaulted. We do know that those numbers are not completely accurate because those are numbers that have been reported. So when you think of all the cases that are not reported, obviously that number will be much higher. This community, I've been dedicated to the SIU for 7 years now, and we are seeing people that are actually coming to the office. They're calling the office directly if they're needing something, if they have questions, or if they're wanting to report something. They're seeing the results of what's happening in the state's attorney's office and our justice system. So I feel that people are feeling more supported around this very intimate and very heavy crime.
If somebody wants to contact your unit or your office, how do they do it?
They can call 334-6002.
Right. So the unit has been around, did you say 7 years?
It's been, yes, since 2010.
So how is it funded?
So the unit's funded by grants statewide, and so we apply for money from the legislature essentially, and we have to comply with certain things to get that money, but the money's never enough. And so we are doing fundraising because we could really use another detective, and so we're looking for funding to do that, and we also really could use a dedicated victim advocate in the office as well. So we have been working really hard, and we have some fundraising coming up in order to help keep this going and keep it assisting the people within our community.
So what are your fundraising efforts going to be?
So this fall we're going to be doing a jail and bail where predominant people from the community will be arrested and people will have to bail them out in order to get them out of jail for the day. And so that's one of the ones coming up.
I would be afraid to take part in that one because I have never had a speeding ticket. But I'm just afraid if somebody threw me behind bars, they'd say, let's keep them there for a while.
Well, we might be able to get you involved. You think anyone would bail you out?
No, I'm not really certain. My wife for 31 years, she might let me sweat it out for a week or so. But that's a good project. If you need any help, let me know.
Thank you.
And what else are you doing?
That's the one that set up most immediately, but we're looking at other fundraising options.
Right. And this is really needed.
It's really needed. The detectives are completely overworked. I really appreciate the work that Jen does, but she's working all hours of the day and night working on these cases, and it's just really, really difficult for the detectives and the number that we have to cover the number of cases that they have.
Now I'll ask you, and maybe this isn't fair game. Is I would imagine having a very competent state's attorney makes your job a lot easier. How has it been working with the new now 2 years in office? How has it been?
It does make my job much easier, and I think fortunately we're a very small community, Orleans County, and we work really well together, and I feel very supported when I have these cases and I bring them forward to the state's attorney's office. I can call her at any hour of the day. If I have a question, if I'm working late and I have to go do a search warrant or a case comes in, I'm very confident that I can call her and get the support and the answers that are needed. The victims in these cases and the survivors, the families, stay in contact with our office, and I feel that that's because they're getting the support that they need and they're seeing results.
Right.
And people are being held accountable.
Right. Okay, final words. 30 seconds.
Well, I just want to thank you very much for having me on the show, and I think these crimes are very personal and very, very important, and I'm thankful that I'm able to continue to do this work.
I just want viewers to know about the unit that we have, and that we have a really specialized team. So if this is happening in your home or you have a family member that it is, we have very competent people to take the disclosures, and we're working very hard from start to finish to make sure that these cases are as strong as possible and that the survivors are supported.
So I want to commend both of you for coming on, because you do have a tough job, and I think it's great that you're being very public about it, because Jen has been on my show several times, and I think it's good to put a face to the behind the scenes components of the law, because, you know, to tell you the truth is, until I was a newspaper reporter in the old days, I didn't even know what a state's attorney was, and I'm still learning all the time. So I just think it's great that you are so willing to be out there in the public, and I appreciate you coming too, and I invite both of you on anytime you want to come, because I think there's a huge educational component of both of your jobs.
Thanks for having us, Scott.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.